the question of this panel is a very important one because it touches on the reciprocal relation between society and science. So, and I'm delighted to be here with you, really esteemed speakers. And so I would like to ask you a question and to stimulate the debate, which is about how can we be sure that there is enough science literacy in society that allows to understand what the scientific community produces, and this understanding allows also for the scientific community to produce an impact on society. So for you, how can we make sure that there is this greater science literacy in society? Luiz.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon again for those who have been in the last session. Can you hear me?
I don't know if you, I don't think it works, the mic. I think it's not
Technical
on.
problems.
I mean.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, you can
You're
hear
back.
me.
Yes, now you can.
So, you know, of course, this is a...
No,
No.
yes.
Yes?
Now, yes.
Yes, it's okay.
Yes.
So,
I mean,
so you know, I would say that that's, this question may have an universal response, but I think it's a regional or country-dependent question. So I will start with Brazil, but I think that what I'm going to say about Brazil is, part of it is quite universal, and it's related to what Serge said in his first speech. You know, you should start early. You should start even with the children before they go to basic education, stimulating the curiosity, and in basic education, that's where they are going to be formed. Okay? And they're going to be formed in several aspects. People have mentioned here this gender discrimination and so forth. You know, that starts in basic education. That is starting in basic education now. Now, of course, in Brazil, we have a very specific problem, which is common to other regions in Latin America. And namely, you know, I used to say that we are wasting millions of brains, of minds, in Brazil and in Latin America. Children who did not have the chance to come from families with more money power, more resources, and the basic education for these children is different from the basic education that people that come from wealthier family get. Okay? So, you know, I think that the idea that everybody, every child, will have the same opportunities when this child is born, that's not valid in countries like Brazil and in other countries in Latin America and in many countries in the world. Okay? So this difference, just in the opposite way, it accentuates this difference. So if you are thinking about science literacy, that's where we should start. That's where we should start, okay? With very good basic education, very good teachers, motivated teachers, and of course, teachers admired by society as a whole. So I think that's the best way to start it.
Thanks a lot, Luiz, and this really speaks to me because it's the core of SDG 4, the Sustainable Development Goal 4, on in education equality. Education for all, that all means all, but it does not. So, Serge, please.
Yes, I think that what Luiz said is valid also in Europe. The fact that you have people who don't get the kind of education that people coming from educated family get. It's not only a question of wealth, it's a question of education and education transmitting from one generation to the next. So these are the roles of parents, and I think the society should try to compensate for the lack of education, the lack of taking care of the children, which makes this difference. I think ideally what we should aim at is a kind of symbiosis between society and science. Science should be recognized by society as something valuable, and for that you need to educate the general population, and conversely, Science should give to society rewards corresponding to discoveries and inventions which will be necessary to solve the problems that that mankind is facing. I think also that science is not only important because it is useful, it's also important because it's a marker of civilization, and if you want to attract young people into science, the best way is to give them, to open them to important questions about the universe, about life, questions that they naturally ask when they are young. And if you can attract them to science by explaining them that science will give answers to this question, will satisfy their curiosities, and you will bring them into science, and maybe later they will be interested in more applied topics. But a way to attract young people into science is to express this value of science not as something useful, but as something essential to satisfy an innate curiosity that you have in mankind.
Thank you, Serge. Isabella.
Okay, let's see. Boa tarde a todos. Good afternoon. I try to bring different perspectives. I absolutely agree with my friends here. But look, when you go into the society based on my experience here and internationally, okay, I think that we need to understand how science will come in this century, because we have a huge challenge for humankind, considering not only climate change, but also the emergence of bio-age, and also how digital and technological age is coming. It's a new contest, absolutely new contest, okay? And so the scientific knowledge is not only to provide solutions, but how this will mobilize people or not in the right directions. If you go to the new artificial intelligence tools, for example, it is absolutely, we have trade-offs today, good answers, bad answers. So the first point, politically, considering my experience, we need a new pact, new deals between society and science. It's not only scientific institutions, not only scientists. It's also the use of scientific information to provide solutions for people that need. And how we can have these deals is a new political tissue that is emerging. Consider climate change, for example. We have been the last 40 years have been discussing climate change. Finally, have everyone looking forward to understand what is happening in climate change. But it's happening, okay? It will not happen, it's happening. So we need to manage short-term perspective and long-term perspective to make sure that we can connect people and the diversity of asymmetries and situations around the world. So it's not only data, metrics, scientific institutions, knowledge, but how you mobilize scientific knowledge to bring people together, considering our realities, consider our political systems, consider our inequalities, and also our relationship with time. So I think that it's very interesting that you can use the diversity of tools that we have today in the world, connecting science as really a solution providers with limits, and also make clear that you have trade-offs. If you go this, you probably can have this political tissue, and that means trust. How societies will trust in science and go against the negationism, go against the polarized situation that we have today, that split us and make sure that we need new nature enlightenment, if I can use the expression, if we want to move the direction, in the right direction, consider this century. So let's have deals, okay, and probably convince people to come together.
That allows me to jump on another issue, because you talk about trust. You talk about communication or information. So how can the scientific community help to build a better trust in the society about scientific research, especially in an era where there is a lot of misinformation?
Yeah, well, it's, first of all, we should perceive that the question is not just us communicating with them. No. But we should listen to them. We should listen to society, and that's very important. And if we listen to them, we find ways of better communicating with them. Also, that's one point. The second point is that we should be very careful in distinguishing science from knowledge. They're different things. knowledge is broader than science. Science implies the scientific method.
Yes.
However, knowledge is not exclusive of scientists. And if you go to Brazil, if you come to Brazil, well, we have seen some of the richness, the wealth of culture in Brazil here, just small samples. And in fact, you have lots of different diverse cultures in Brazil, and we should listen to them. And in fact, if we consider that what they are doing is also knowledge, we could learn from them. And, you know, for instance, something that our past minister knows very well, if you go to the Amazon region, that's a big challenge for Brazil. You know, sometimes I talk about the moonshot in the United States, you know, when Kennedy said we are going to put a man in the moon within the next decade, but not because that's going to be easy, but because it's going to be difficult. And what he meant is that in order to do that, he had to change many things. He had to change the industrial profile, he had to change the education. So the question is, what is our moon? What are our moons? And I'm quite sure that the Amazon and the biomes are a very good candidate for our moon, but we should focus on that. So and I should say that the indigenous people in the Amazon, they have information on the medical plants, for instance. It's knowledge, it's not science, it's knowledge, but the cooperation with them is really important because they can show what are the best, what are the medical plants there. And there are amazing examples. If you give me just 1 minute, I'll show you one example.
Yes, of course.
Okay, there is a plant in the Amazon from which a substance called bergenine is extracted. Bergenine is an anti-inflammatory, antioxidant substance. Bergenine, purified to 95%, is sold in Brazil by the Merck Labs from Switzerland by a price per milligram, which is 5,000 more expensive than a milligram of gold. You see, that's our gold. That's our gold. And that's related to the first question, because we should teach children about that. The same way children were taught about the moon, we should teach them about biodiversity and make them play with that, because that's part of the wealth of the country. So that's what I consider to be important now.
Thank you. Serge, you want to?
I agree with what you said, but I think the misconceptions and this idea that science is against us is something which does not come from this kind of experience. It comes in our society, which is supposed to be more educated, and it is very difficult to fight against that. I think it's a feeling of isolation. People, there is one reason people are afraid about science. Science is universal. Science gives a kind of global truth which is valid for everyone. And naturally, people like to be inside their own community and share values which makes them different from others. So it's exactly the opposite of the science universality. And in order to fight against that, it's very difficult because it's a question of religion, ideologies, that you have to fight in a society which is full of inequalities. The people who usually who are against science are people who are afraid of the globalization of the world, are afraid of the direction in which the world is going, and they feel that they are left on the side of the evolution, or the side of the progress. And this is this feeling that has to be fought against. And for that, again, we come back to education. We come back to making citizens who are resistant to demagogues and to the people who try to convey these ideas, and I think it's very difficult. We see some progress. We were talking about this anti-vaccine which developed during the COVID crisis, and apparently now it has subsided, and you don't hear about it anymore. We heard about people who were denying climate change, and now they don't, at least they speak much less loudly than they used to. So in the end, I think that the science prevails, but it's a lot of fighting, and it's a lot of waste of energy to fight against this trend.
So, thanks. So I will change a little bit the question for you, because
I'll change the answer also.
No, because you introduced this question talking about trust and communication. So how we can make sure that this scientific research is effectively translated in useful and effective policies?
Okay, look, I try to be brief. First of all, we need to understand when you go into scientific knowledge and traditional knowledge, okay? When you try to bring this together, this is happening today in Brazil, for example. This means that we're looking to address inclusiveness, a political inclusiveness. This means that we're looking for not only to address knowledge, scientific and non-scientific, but to address people. And people used to look for the solutions. So the first thing, how we can provide solutions and make sure that we can have a narrative, a scientific narrative that explains things, and people could engage and be co-responsible to provide solutions, to act in the right direction. Because we can provide solutions not necessarily for a full cycle, but we can start the game, we start the new game in the new direction, explain step by step what are the shared challenges that together society and also scientists or science have. At the same time, we go into public policies, or go to this process that you capture from the scientific knowledge and also the political will, when you live in a democracy, for example, okay, also the traditional knowledge, and you bring this and try to figure out how to frame things, consider vision and strategy, tools, and how to finance things. What it means, this is public policies. Yes. Okay, and go to the National Congress, because the democracy to have a pact, a deal, that is the direction that you like to go. What is important is not only the kickoff, as scientists come as a kickoff, really good player, but how we can monitor step by step that we are doing the things in the right direction. It's not only the public policy, how we implement things, how science is a partner to make sure that we are doing things the right direction, and how we can use scientific knowledge and also scientific institutions with transparency to avoid setbacks in the future. So if I'm a country that's one of the most important food producers in the world, and we eradicated hunger in the past, why hunger is back in Brazil? It's not only an income problem, okay? Of course, there is a lack of confidence and trust into the society that allow things to happen, and science that comes to connect with, for example, health, and how we can have money to health system, public health system, people must connect this. If not, even when you have the vaccines around the world, you have really a shot to give the right answer, but you are not able to provide vaccines with symmetry for all the societies around the world. So we are perverse the day after. And people always will remember this. So you need to go step by step, and you need, in my opinion, you need to trust and transparency, and scientific knowledge is key if it's addressed to deal with concrete realities. If not, it's global numbers, and Dona Maria, Seu Antônio, never will be worried about this.
Okay, thank you. So just in
and trust you, okay, breathe, calm, 1, 2, 3, she's so anxious.
In relation to what Isabella just said, so what about the fact that how to make sure that funding for scientific research goes to something that is useful to get a better society, and not to specific projects that, are there for profit?
Yeah, okay, so first comment is related to the book Serge showed in his talk, The Usefulness of Useless Knowledge. Okay? So that should be considered also by governments as well, okay? And sometimes it's very difficult to convince governments that useful things come out from useless knowledge. And the history of science, the history of humanity show that. Okay? Show that. I wonder, we know that I'm a physicist, Serge too, and the young guys, watch out, young guys here, the young guys, less than 30 years old, who in the beginning of the 20th century started to look at the microscopic world and found out a new physics, a new world, quantum physics, they were not thinking about applications of that. And yet, what, 100 years afterwards, there was an article in Scientific American showing that 1/3 of the gross national product of the United States came from quantum physics. Okay? But you know, that science goes like that. And it's very difficult to convince the governments that that's true. And some governments know it, others don't. And in fact, those that understand that usually are those that can advance even practical things much better, because they are able to do these jumps to new technologies, jumps to new ideas, which if you just think about useful things, you are sort of using this old technology and these old ideas. So we need new ideas in this world of ours, new ideas, and they are very much interconnected with basic science. Actually, nowadays, sometimes it's very difficult to say what is basic and what is applied, because the time between some basic discovery and some applied technology gets shorter and shorter. So, so we have to go to the parliament. We have to convince them that science is important, and we have to go, there is a barrier there. Of course, they are elected by their region, they want to benefit their regions, and that's a big fight. It's a big fight. We must talk with them, and we have tried to do that for many years. It's a fight which I think is not only in Brazil, but all over the world. It's very difficult to convince them. And again, we have to give them examples of the history of science and what's going on in the world.
But the problem is that even if they understand and they claim that they understand it, they don't practice it. There is a tendency from policymakers, the politicians, to try to direct science from the top down, to organize big programs, to say, okay, for example, now the big program are quantum technologies everywhere in the world. But quantum technology will not come from the top down. It comes from the bottom up, from scientists who have a passion for the field and who discover things which later on may or may not have application. With Luiz, we have been working on this field since the 1980s. At that time, we did not know what quantum information was about. We did not care. We just had the idea that the challenge of trying to find out whether some things were possible, whether we would be able to trap particles of light inside a box and see what would happen. And then in the 1990s, we learned that this was useful for quantum information. So we had to learn what quantum information is about. And that's the way science works. And we have to understand that it takes a long time. And as Luiz said, the politicians, there is a gap, a contradiction between the short term of politics and the long term of science. Politicians are re-elected after 4 years or 5 years, and to mature a scientific project might take decades. And this gap is dangerous. I think that there are some solutions to that, but it's very difficult to implement them. Countries have understood that there are some domains in which you need long term. For example, in Europe, we have a central bank which has the duty to preserve, to fight against inflation, whatever the government is. And all governments have to obey to the rule of the central bank. I would dream about a central body for science, telling to politicians who are against science that, no, you cannot do that. There is a long-term project of mankind in science, and this happens. There are some countries which have a kind of organization which is above the government. Unfortunately, it is not the case in Brazil, I think, and it is not the case in France, I think. And I think this is a problem. This would be a solution to try to bridge the gap between short-term and long-term.
And if I may add just a small comment, of course, there is one way to do it, which is also very difficult. Of course, we are in the parliament, but we should go to society, actually. We should do whatever is possible to convince society that will vote for the
right people.
The right people. But that's tough.
So
that's very, very tough.
The time has flown, and I'm very sorry that I have to stop this panel. But before then, I would like one word, and I will start with
One
Isabella.
sentence, not one word. I have a really red number there, but look, science is a political player. Not only politicians are political players. Wake up. If you live in a democracy, you are a political player, so you have responsibility to change things. If not, go to the beach, relax, drink a caipirinha, and forget the world.
Okay, good, fine. And one word for you, what really thinks it's needed from society to serve science? One word.
Well,
low carbon
we should go to
guys?
society.
You
We
should
should go to society. We should tell them why science is important for our country, for the world, and for Brazil in special. There are many challenges in Brazil which need science, and one of them has already mentioned our biomes, which are being destroyed, and to counter that, we need science to show that it's more profitable things that can be done.
Our existence is scientific, okay? So
Yes.
Okay, I would have loved to continue this conversation, but I am obliged to stop.
Please.
I have one question for you. Do you think that the scientific community and scientific research is aligned with the challenges of our society? Yes or no?
nothing.
Oh, this is a...
I didn't see.
this is a no clear answer. Thanks a lot
Thank you very much,
my
guys.
panelists.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
you
you,
were
my pleasure.
wonderful and very nice. Thank you. Thanks so much.